In 3, 2, 1, action.
Welcome back to another action-packed episode of The Weekday. We got a brand new switcher.
Oh, we did?
We did.
Hey.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Hey,
Is that why we're running
The buttons are so much more fun to push.
So there's going to be a number of things that are going to happen in this episode. Welcome. This is episode 70-something of The Weekday. I'm Andy.
I'm back.
You're not back. We'll talk about that in a minute. You're Mike. And you like to party. And...
hey,
on
I'm
the
Justin.
wheels, Justin Deal on the wheels of steel.
Hey.
Justin, you're 2 months into marriage. How's it going? Give us a blow by blow breakdown.
We're still married.
Wow.
Yes. Hey.
Proud of you, buddy. Proud of you.
Yes.
I only preside over marriages that I know are going to last at least 3 months.
Hey.
So,
Have you had one that hasn't yet? How's your record right now? I'm 3 months in.
Oh, I'm 8 no.
Yeah.
I've done 8 weddings.
Wow.
All of them made it past 3 months. Look at this.
That's 100%.
Yeah.
I did it, guys. Hey, whether you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook or any of the socials, or you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all the rest, thank you so much for being here. We would love you to do a couple of things. Number 1, join the Weekday Army by sharing this with somebody and increasing the Weekday Army. Number 2, I know we just dropped a single for Bay Hope Worship. Would you like to talk about that real quick?
Thank you.
All right, and now that
No. Yeah. Yes, thank you. The new single came out last Friday.
Yeah.
The 16th.
Yeah, of September.
And I think it's great. And you could find it on Spotify or wherever you
this is arousing.
stream your music.
What's it called?
Thank you. It is called.
No, it's called Thank You. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yes. So we've been singing here at church for a while, and I think it's pretty cool.
I do too. It sounds good. You guys did great with it. I can't wait to see the video. Justin. Got him. But here's how I know. So a couple of things have happened over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, yes, Mike is back. Mike went on vacation, and then he was a little under the weather. And
I got COVID.
Okay, well, I didn't say that because I didn't know. We can't really say that on YouTube.
Oh, really?
I think, I don't know. There
Justin,
was a
can you bleep?
There was a demonetizing. Of course, we're not monetizing our YouTube channel yet.
If I bleep it during a church podcast,
I think it'd be pretty great.
there's some things there. Yeah. So can you just do the 30 seconds later thing over that?
Let's just say I contracted a virus that was fairly popular about 2 years ago.
Monkey. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Influenza.
About 2 years ago.
Influenza.
It was not
Bird
influenza.
flu.
According to a test that I took, I received a positive result.
Cool. Here, I want to show you. So this is going to be a strictly audio. We're just breezing on right by this. The other reason that I know that we got another switcher is that I can now do this.
whoa.
Yeah.
Hey, you just hijacked.
Look, Ma, no hands.
Wait, it's
Justin's
not working anymore.
I broke it. It's offline now.
Well,
I put too many inputs in there. Anyway, I've got a magical little iPad.
He's not on it. It's just Justin.
we can't see that you're holding up the iPad.
Hold on, Justin. Hold on. I gotta reconnect on the fly
I'm not
here.
touching the switcher for the rest
This
of the
is
episode.
rousing audio.
So,
Look,
unless you fix it.
look. It's back. It's back.
Right now?
Backstreet's back.
It's not. Oh, there it
Backstreet's
is.
back. Look,
Here.
I have an iPad now that I can
Wow.
actually control. Look, I'm gonna move this lever here.
Oh.
Look at that.
Why does your iPad app look more complicated than the physical switcher?
Oh, because it 100% is.
I just think-
there's a lot going on.
There's most things in life.
Oh man, I'm getting lightheaded. This is great. So Justin, I'm gonna let you produce the show the rest of the time. Okay? I just wanted to show it. I'm gonna get.
Whatever we can do.
I'm gonna let you produce the show.
For the record, I just didn't switch to me right there. You're still producing.
Okay. All right.
All right. Anyway, we had our fun. We have fun here. Look, I shut it off. I'm gonna put it right in the middle of the table, and I'm not gonna touch it again. But if Mads or Austin or Mike wants to touch it,
Oh no,
that's fine.
Oh,
Fine.
no.
That's neither here nor there.
Give it to Austin. Don't give it to Mike.
Yeah.
Why? Because of my disease?
Yeah, because of the thing we just talked about that you took the test for. Before we jump into what we're actually talking about today, I did have a quick question. So it's September 20th, and September 20th traditionally is when you start going to the stores and you start smelling the cinnamon.
Hey, tomorrow is the
September 21st. It's the day.
vernal equinox.
Yeah, it's the day that fall starts. theoretically. So my question for everybody here and everybody online is when is too early for pumpkin?
March. When is too early for? I answered that question. It is March. March is too early.
So April is fine.
April's also too early.
What is
by your
what
logic?
is the
You're going
latest?
backwards.
I'm just saying.
Let me explain the gosh darn question.
All right. Okay.
So I like the smell of those cinnamon brooms. I really do. For like 2 weeks when you walk into Publix or ShopRite or wherever you're at. And ShopRite's from up north. Yeah. Back off me, dude. Or Target. How's that? Hobby Lobby.
It's great.
Well, more on Hobby Lobby in a little bit. So my wife likes to call this season all things pumpkin season. I maintain that all things pumpkin season cannot start until at least the Burr months. So October, November, I guess September.
What about September?
Yeah, but like October, like I feel like that's when pumpkin season starts is October. So what say you?
Hold on, question. Can pumpkin...
They have to grow.
No, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Also, like pumpkin seasoning is not pumpkin seasoning.
No.
We're
It's
just adding
nutmeg.
cinnamon.
It's nutmeg,
to
allspice,
things.
and cinnamon.
Yeah. So, like, I don't know what pumpkins have to do
You've
with
been
this.
brainwashed, brother.
Brother. So, what was the question?
Well,
When do I want it?
When
I don't
should
want
pumpkin
it.
season start? You don't do pumpkin season?
I don't do it. Also, this is the question I was going to ask. Like, when does it stop?
Like Christmas.
What's our window?
I think Christmas.
So, like, people having pumpkin stuff and Christmas is like a supreme no-no?
No. I think that's like the cutoff because you don't see pumpkin pie at
Is
New
it a
Year's.
bell curve? So
Oh,
when
100%.
When's peak
is Thanksgiving.
pumpkin?
Yeah, peak pumpkin is Thanksgiving Day. You got that?
I got it.
But so I figure.
And then it slashes up by January 1. If anybody has a pumpkin spice anything January 1, you slap it out of their hands.
Well,
because we're at the bottom of the crest.
Right. The PSL then turns into peppermint spice latte, not pumpkin spice latte.
Both of those sound terrible.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's like drinking sand.
I can't
but
do
the
it.
point the point is not that the point is that it's a representation of the season that you are in. And so in Florida we don't have seasons.
Right.
We have summer and Christmas.
Right.
And really that's it. And so we need to find ways to mark the seasons.
Right.
So this is the way you mark the seasons by what, common sense tells you from Starbucks.
Madeline, do you drink pumpkin spice things?
As a matter of fact, we met with her last Tuesday.
Yeah.
And what did she have in her cup but a PSL? Yep.
PSL.
And I told her at that time it was like drinking sand.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We gotta move to the next thing.
I definitely think in October is a proper time for a pumpkin.
I feel like we're just ready to peel back the calendar a little bit.
I know that like that's not what's gonna happen. I know corporations are like just chomping at the bit.
Oh, end of August.
August 1.
Yeah, my birthday.
Yeah.
Right around
whatever
my birthday
they can
time.
do to like squeeze profits, they're gonna do it. So
Pumpkin squeezings.
pumpkin squeeze latte.
That's what it means. PSL. Okay, we're going to jump to a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk a lot. We're going to burn the church to the ground. More after this.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for being a part of the weekday. I just want to let you know that Bay Hope Worship is releasing new content, new songs all the time. Make sure to head over to our YouTube, our Instagram, or our Spotify account. The links are down below in the description, and check them out.
I just hit start on my brand new iPhone, and I tell you what, it's just like the last iPhone with a cool color, and
Sure.
the camera bump is huge. It's massive.
All right.
But the cool thing now is that they actually leveled it out a little bit. So my old iPhone, it would wobble big time. Now it doesn't wobble so much.
You should have gotten a different case.
I like these cases here with the kickstand because I'm old and I like putting it up like that because I'm an old person.
This is great content.
Welcome back to the weekday. So before the break, I am killing it.
Yeah, you're doing great.
Thanks, Mike. This is great. This is a bonding moment. We've done like 70 something of these episodes and we've never really gotten to this topic. We've skirted around the issue of the church and kind of the modern day equivalent of today's church versus like yesterday's church and all those other things. We've talked about the development of capital C church, the world church, and not like world churchism, but the church in the world. And we've talked about specifically influencers and YouTube and kind of the rise of social media and its influence on church. But we've never actually put all of those together to talk about A, the state of the church, and B, kind of where the church came from in terms of its mission. So I was reading and I was listening to a podcast, and real quick, we're going to title this episode, and you'll understand why in a minute. We're going to title this episode "Evangelicalism is a Myth," or "The Evangelical Church is a Myth." I haven't decided. It's going to depend on what the keyword search says.
Okay.
So I listened to a podcast called The Holy Post by this guy, Phil Schiller. Phil Vischer. Phil Vischer. I'm sorry, not Phil Schiller. Phil Vischer, who you may know him from VeggieTales and other things. And he and this other pastor, Skye Jitani, each week they'll do a podcast, and it delves into some of the things about Christian culture. It's a great podcast. I highly recommend it. We're going to put a link in the show notes from an episode that I was listening to last week that brought up this article by Kirsten Sanders in the amazing website called The Hedgehog Review, which I really do love the title of that website. And the title of the actual episode, or the title of the article, is The Evangelical Question in the History of American Religion. Now, that's a lot of words, and that's a lot of big words.
Right.
And so what we want to do in this episode is that we actually want to break down the question of, is the evangelical church a myth? And then in the next episode, we actually want to talk about our responses, because the Weekday is a behind-the-scenes church podcast. We all work at a church. Like, we want to kind of peel back the curtain and show you what happens in church thinking. This article, which is going to be linked in the doodly-doo below, is big, and it's very long, and she does a good job, I think, of breaking down.
Well, the first half's pretty thick with like sociology.
Yeah, and there's a lot of
terms.
history. There's a lot of history and
The
stuff
history
too.
is like a narrative, which I understood a little bit better.
Yeah.
That was a little bit easier to get through.
Yeah.
And that's like the last half.
So the article itself essentially breaks down the church, and this is primarily American Western church, breaks down what our mission should be as the church. Right. We are called to be evangelicals. And the term evangelism is the act of going and taking the gospel from the Bible to the world, taking the good news of what Jesus Christ did, died, buried, resurrected, coming again someday, into the world.
Yeah.
That's what evangelism is. That's what Paul did. That's what Peter did. That's what the 11, then 12 disciples did. And then it spread to the ends of the earth. That's what Jesus' mission for us was. But the term evangelical, somewhere along the way, got co-opted into meaning something completely different. And we want to talk a little bit, we want to discuss what evangelical, A, means, B, what it looks like right now, and C, like where it's headed. So, Mike, you read the article.
Yes.
Starting in around the mid 1800s, there was a guy named Billy Sunday who was
itinerant preacher.
Yeah, he was an itinerant preacher. He was very vivacious, and he had a lot of vim and vigor and verve. That's a lot of V's there. He had a lot going on, and he was running around and essentially smashing against denominations that had formed and saying, like, no, you don't need this denominational support. All you need is Jesus.
Yeah.
And that was evangelism from the 1800s up until the 1940s-ish, 1930s-ish.
Sure.
Right around there. Right around the time that Billy Graham happened.
Right.
And Billy Graham started using a lot of technology and things. So Kirsten calls this evangelism A.
Right.
Now, evangelism A, go for it.
Well, I was going to say there's a couple other things here within the first section of, do you want to read to what their
there's one part-
definition of evangelical is? Like what it does evangelical church, what is, if someone is to label themselves as as an evangelical, what is that?
Right. Well, so the
right there.
ask a crowded room of this is how the article starts. Ask a crowded room of evangelicals, quote, what is an evangelical? And you'll likely get a crowded set of answers. It's one of the questions, perhaps the main question, evangelicals argue about most strenuously. And then this guy called Bebbington, it's a lot of stuff here. Evangelicals, Bebbington argued, were Christians who possessed four interlocking qualities: biblicism, which is an emphasis on the priority of Scripture; activism, which is a personal commitment to live out the faith; crucicentrism, which is a dope word, a focus on the centrality of the cross for human salvation and meaning; and evangelism, a need to share the faith with others. Wesley put it another way, where he had a quadrilateral of Scripture, reason, tradition, and experience. But this is the thing that really got me, and this is what we're going to talk about a little bit. evangelicalism is a byproduct of a flood of culture. And put another way, evangelicalism, this is from the article, is the form the Christian religion tends to take within modern American culture. It would be impossible, or it is impossible, to be an American Christian without being heavily influenced by evangelicalism.
Sure. Yeah.
I would even say that it's nearly impossible to be a white American Christian without being an evangelical. And that's where we want to land today, because this idea of evangelicalism is so tied in with culture.
Yeah.
And that's what she talks about with evangelicalism A, B, and C. So the culture of A was Billy Sunday to Billy Graham, kind of the itinerant smashing against the denominations and all that.
And not just that too. This was the beginning of large corporations.
Yes.
Beginning to form.
Yes.
And you begin to have, the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers and all that kind of stuff. People who really began to understand technology, and not necessarily marketing, but almost like the corporate structure of how these things are supposed to work. And so you begin to see that sort of in culture. I thought something that was super interesting that she brought to light was the publishing company. Erdmans, which began as like, they were doing like literature for American Dutch people, basically people coming from the Netherlands, repatriating, is that resettling, that's better, into America, wanting to start their new life in America, but they still have this Dutch heritage. As they started to phase out and just become Americans at that point, Erdmans realized like, hey, we need to do something else or else we're going to lose our business. So they begin to start to print sort of like this generic Christian material. And
they called it Christian. It wasn't Baptist. It wasn't Methodist. It wasn't Episcopalian. It was quote unquote Christian.
So like sort of a homogenized Christian, whatever.
Yep.
So yeah, and then I thought that was like a really interesting.
Well, it's interesting she put that there because then it misses out on the B stage, which we'll talk in a second. But in the C stage, it really starts to hit home.
Yep.
Keep going. I cut you off.
No, that's fine. And yeah, I mean, like, and then she has the Moody Bible Institute, which is also, again, they began to start using technology, which is not a new thing, for Christians to do or whatever, as tools to be evangelistic with the message of the gospel or whatever, but under a Christian identity as opposed to maybe a bit more subjugated, denominational.
Good word.
I don't know if even subjugated is the...
No, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, so like they don't define themselves as Presbyterians or Baptists. It's just Christian.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so...
Again, sort of like going to lowest common denominator to a certain degree in some of these things.
Right, and it's the lowest common denominator thing that leads then into the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s with Billy Graham.
Right.
And this is where it gets a little bit interesting, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time in this because it's pretty self-evident, but the Billy Graham into the Jesus People era of the 50s, 60s, and 70s really sort of paved the way for the big corporate church. And so this is what she calls evangelical B.
Right.
And so the A
like
kind of
Billy Graham punted it off to the Jesus
people. Yeah. And Billy Graham was using TV and satellites and stuff, and Billy Graham was doing great things. But the core of the doctrinal differences that were happening between Baptists and Methodists and Episcopalians and Presbyterians and Catholics and all this were being stripped away for what some were actually calling Billy Graham at the time a simplistic, egocentric version of Christianity, meaning it's all about you and God. There's no like exterior things. And while the Bible teaches that, the Bible teaches faith and works, faith and deeds. It teaches those things. Billy Graham is essentially saying like, no, you just need to believe and you're good.
Right.
Like, and we can argue that all day, like biblically, not biblically. We can argue that whole thing all day. But so that then got punted to the Jesus People. The Jesus People turned a little bit more social activist, kind of what we're seeing in today's swing back into, hey, we're going to be more social reformed. We're just going to love people and we're going to do the whole thing.
And I do think the second section too has two different parts of it as well.
Yes, it does.
Which she doesn't really go into.
No, she references.
Right.
And those two parts are, the first part is the Billy Graham.
Yeah, well, like the Billy Graham, the Jesus movement, and then that leads us right into sort of the megachurch era.
Right.
Where like megachurches, it's hard to think about, but like church has not always been the way that it is right now.
Right.
And so, you have these massive organization and entities of like thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people. You really can't have a belief system that is like relatively nuanced. You have to, so to do that.
That's a good point. I never thought about it that way.
To do that, you have to, and you have to sort of make it not a community-based thing. And so, she references a lot of like we got rid of, sort of denominations did this, Protestantism did this to a certain extent, especially like, you go all the way back to the Reformation with Martin Luther and everything. Like we're basically at the tail end of the Renaissance, which was this rebirth of arts and culture and all that kind of stuff.
Thinking.
But it was also the birth of like reason and logic and the scientific method, which
That's where the Enlightenment came from. Yep.
Yeah, that inherently is not a bad thing, but it sort of demystified a lot of these things that we kind of thought God controlled or whatever, which you could argue, does God still control that anyway? I don't know. That's not what we're here to talk about. But as Protestantism started to become more and more of a thing, we sort of started to demystify Christianity. And the only thing that sort of remained was that mystical element was the Bible, basically.
Yep.
And so in evangelicalism B, and to a certain extent A, you sort of see this very personal expression of what Christianity is supposed to be. And, we have access, which is great, to this mystical book called the Bible. Like we hear God and see God through the Bible. It really elevated, I don't know if rightly or wrongly, but just like it elevated the Bible to almost like a deity to a certain extent. Yeah. And that's sort of kind of a little bit of what she's arguing. Like this very personal, like I don't need to practice my faith in relationship with other people.
Yeah, in a corporate setting.
Yeah, like I can sit at home and read my Bible.
Yeah, there was a stinging line in there.
And I can come in on Sunday morning and worship, but like outside of that, I don't really need anything else,
There was a stinging line. I'm not going to be able to find it now.
Yeah, that's okay.
But essentially, she said something to the effect of like, yeah, and the megachurch, then it gave way to having thousands of people together, nobody knowing anybody, and then you living out your faith in a private, personal manner, and that's evangelicalism B. And what the entirety of what you see.
Sorry, real quick. Also, she did say an evangelical.
Oh, sorry.
You go.
No, you go.
No, you.
Justin, you go. Okay, so, Mike, you go. No, you go. No, Mike, you go.
So I think something she did say too is in this evangelicalism B category, this like middle category, is if you were to understand it, like if you wanted to understand what that looks like, especially towards the tail end, as it is the faith, football, and family.
Oh gosh, I wanted to get to that so bad.
Yeah, like the idea of, and almost like evangelicalism B, this era, it saw co-opting the political right, and the moral majority into evangelicals now vote Republican.
Right.
This is kind of when that happened. That didn't happen before 1979, 1980,
right.
The Reagan election or whatever.
Yeah.
But once that happened, it sort of solidified evangelicals as like this right-leaning group.
Yep.
And became, honestly, because it is almost American Christianity is almost indistinguishable from evangelicalism.
Yep.
Like it is a fairly large population of people.
So where I wanted to go with this, and Justin, I'll get to you in just one quick second, but evangelicalism B. So A was kind of like this stripping away of all of the nonsense around what the quote unquote nonsense. It's not nonsense. Please don't hear that. The doctrinal things around Christianity. Evangelicalism B saw the rise of a quote unquote personal faith that was followed by not really, never having to have community connections and community ties.
Right.
And
Even really discipleship.
Well, that's where I was going.
Yeah.
And a homogenized discipleship strategy of show up on a Sunday, give your money, maybe take communion, whatever your tradition says to take communion, maybe do a small group. But like, other than that, you can put the Jesus fish on the back of your car and you're now a believer. Like, okay, cool. Like, you said yes to Jesus, like, that's cool. Maybe you're missing out on God's best, but okay. But that actually led the way into what Mike and I feel very deeply as musicians and as people that were growing up in the 90s, where all of a sudden there was Christian music and Christian movies and Christian books and Christian bookstore. And like, that stuff always had existed. But now it was this, like, you can turn on the radio and you can hear 5 seconds of a song and go, that's a Christian song.
Yeah.
You don't even have to hear any lyrics.
Oh, boy.
You don't even have to hear anything. You hear one guitar riff or one drum beat and you're like, that's a Christian song. And then that turned into quote unquote worship music.
Sure.
And then that turned into the Hobby Lobby thing, which we're not slamming Hobby Lobby, but there's a feel when you go into Hobby Lobby of, I know the type of person that shops here.
Yeah.
By and large, there's broad brush stereotypes, and I could get in a lot of trouble for saying this. I know the type of person that shops here. They're the faith football family people. And again, nothing wrong with any of that. Nothing wrong with loving Jesus and practicing your faith.
Sure.
Inherently. But it is the idea that evangelicalism follows cultural trends, which is where she ultimately wants to get to. We're 17 minutes into this segment. We're finally getting to this point.
No. Real quick though, too. Something she talks about in the beginning of this, which I think is fascinating, is she talks about how at the beginning of evangelicalism, it ended up becoming like a market decision.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Which I think is very, very fascinating.
Market meaning marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that and just like the way Americans think of things is in a free market capitalistic way.
Right.
And which is stuff that we've talked about a bunch. But I think that that's really, really fascinating.
I agree. And that's where this leads to where the podcast I was listening to on the Holy Post, one of the guys brought up or one of the hosts brought up the idea of Christianity. Christianity is supposed to be like a boat in the ocean. A boat has a hull. It is formed. It cuts through the waves. It's going to get tossed around left and right and center, but that boat is going to remain its shape. It's going to keep everything afloat. It's going to keep moving. You know, it might lose direction and all that other stuff, but by and large, that boat's going to stay the way it is. That's what Christianity should be.
Sure.
American evangelicalism, however, is like a plastic blow-up raft, where when a wave comes, that raft doesn't cut through that wave. It does not go counterculture. It does not go true. It instead goes on top of the wave and forms to that wave and then goes up and goes down with that wave. Right. And the idea there, the vision there, is that raft is what evangelical Christianity has turned into.
Right.
By and large, we follow cultural trends. We follow cultural norms. We use the same words as the culture. We dress the same way. And all these things, again, inherently not bad. We're supposed to be in the world. We're not supposed to be of the world, but we're supposed to be in the world. We are supposed to know how to minister to people who do not necessarily believe like us. So there's one thing about knowing, being sheep among wolves, wolf among sheep type thing. But there's another thing when your entire church adopts its way and markets and does these things, has a corporate strategy that looks, that could be pulled out of a boardroom at Coca-Cola and placed into your church, and none would have been wiser.
Well, and I think too, as I was listening to the podcast and he said that kind of thing, I was like, what else could define, at least, and again, we're still talking about the B section.
The C section we'll get to in a second.
Well, and mostly because
C section, babies. All right, folks.
Yeah.
Good night.
That's a little different. It's a little different than what we're talking about. We're all Justin.
We're all Justin right now.
So,
and we're back.
And the reason, I was thinking about the B section so much is because my formative years were in this B section. From the early 90s until about the mid to late 2000s.
Most of the people listening to this have been in this B section.
Right. And I was thinking what could be a good definer of that? And I said, you know what? You go to Christian Family Bookstore.
Oh yeah.
And you see a chart of, say, if you like Metallica, you will
Project
like
86.
this band.
Zayo.
If you like Usher, you will like this person. And so to me, that is what evangelicalism is.
Oh, that's soul crushing to think of, but that's what I did.
Yeah. Well, we were none the wiser at the moment as to what was actually happening to a certain extent. We were in that specific instance, we're degrading a God-breathed artistic creation, and we are literally comparing it to something that is far superior.
Yeah.
But saying because it's Christian,
Because it has the words Christian in front of it.
you will like this. And like, I think that there was so much about this era that's what happens.
Yeah.
Like if you like country clubs, you should really get into
megachurch.
If you are a part of like your Moose Lodge or whatever, because again, 40 years ago, like that was a thing,
Yep. You should join a men's
Elks
group.
Lodge. Yeah. You will love this thing.
Yeah, you'll love our men's group.
So it was almost like it's a reaction
Yep.
to, as opposed to a advancement.
A proaction.
Yeah, it is. It's a reaction, and like I need to holify this. Sorry, go
That's
ahead.
good. So then we get to the C section, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time today on it because the next episode is going to be our reaction to it. But the current evangelical trend is away from the megachurch, which we've seen that. It really is.
Yeah.
It's towards a more identifiable section of faith. And you can see that. Let's talk politics real quick. You can see that in politics where there's no longer a middle.
Sure.
The middle has pushed everybody to extremes. By and large, you are one or the other. You are one side or the other side. You are
Right.
red, you are blue, you are pro or anti, and that's and again, you talk about that chart with music. Like there's that chart. Like if you vote this way,
Yeah.
if you believe in this, vote for this person. If there are websites devoted to that,
Sure.
and then you have to pick like the top 5 because not everybody's going to match the things that you believe. Faith and churches and digital communities and all sorts of stuff are now springing up around that exact same idea. Church splits they feel like they're at an all-time high, and that split is usually coming from internal struggles of churches instead of, there's always been internal struggles, but it's people planting churches inside of other churches and then leaving because they now have the tools and the resources to do church however they want to do church.
Right.
And the rise of the influencer has made it so that our faith is no longer done by pastorally trained ministers and biblical authorities, and is done now instead
Right.
by Sadie Robertson.
Well, if you have influence, that means you have
Sup, fam.
No, if you have influence, that is your credibility.
That is now your church.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like no longer is it the people with the actual credibility to talk about these things. It is the outward metric, whatever that might be, or the visible metric of how many people you have sort of in your tribe.
Follows, likes, shares, all those things.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is the demarcation
Yep.
of your actual, your credibility.
Right. And there's cool things there. And when we get to next episode, I have some interesting thoughts that I think it's a good thing. Not necessarily the influencer thing, but the fact that small churches are popping up all over the place. Like that's a good thing. That is it. That is a definite good thing. It's dangerous, but it's also a good thing. But the influencer thing, let's go back to that real quick because that is affecting everything top to bottom.
Yeah.
Mads, how old are you? 16? We have a 16-year-old in here. I have a 16-year-old daughter. Austin's like 17.
Right, 13.
Gross. We have a number of Gen Z people on staff, and they will be and Mads and Austin will be the first one to tell you that the influencer has now taken over marketing,
right.
taken over thought leading, taken over. Most people don't learn how to cook now from going to Google. People learn how to cook from going to TikTok.
Sure.
Which is fantastic.
Right. Whatever.
But also like it's crazy. And people by and large don't learn about the Bible from pastors, from not that pastoral leadership is a thing. I'm not saying that, but they don't learn it from people that are trained in biblical authority. Instead, they learn it from the closest person to TikTok.
Yeah.
And that's a little scary.
Sure.
And so that's where evangelicalism C lives. And it's very much evolving right now. The article points to the fact that it probably started in 2001 at 9/11, but she also says it actually probably started in 2007 with the release of the iPhone.
Which I would agree with that.
Which is why I brought up my iPhone at the very beginning.
Even
full circle.
Even I do think that there's something happened in 2001 that was
unifying.
Well, I think it solidified the idea that like the religious right. So like basically if you were a Christian at that time,
you were right.
You were an American evangelical.
Right.
And it solidified the militarism and the patriotism that the church tends to uphold sometimes.
Yeah, agreed.
And so I think that viewpoint solidified in 2001. But I would agree with her that 2007 to like 2012, it was this transitional period.
Big shift, yep. And you and I were both doing ministry in that shift, and still have been. But we were both doing music ministry in that time, and we watched even music trends in the church shift.
I mean, like I was a part of like in Bellerive from 2012 to 2014, when it is now that's when the music industry shifted. And it like from what album sales to streaming. And we were literally in like the worst point of the music industry is exactly when we were in it.
Yeah. It's good for you.
But like that's the same sort of like time that all of this sort of shifted.
Yeah, 100%. Justin, we have neglected you, and I apologize for that. So I'm going to throw you the hardest question, and I'm going to say solve it.
Oh, perfect.
Solve evangelicalism right now. Solve what we're doing wrong as a church. And what I do want to know from you is you're a little bit younger you're kind of splitting between their generation and our generation, because we're old men, and we're old white evangelicals. Didn't you know? That's what the article said. And so you're really honestly in this transitional period. Like your formative years have been like, when did you get your first cell phone?
That was 10th grade.
Oh,
10th grade.
A little later than us, or a little earlier than us. I mean, I got mine.
I mean, like before that, I had a cell phone, but it wasn't a smartphone. It was really just for like, just to have.
Oh, could you text on it?
No.
Oh, yeah, you get in trouble for that?
Oh, yeah, it probably would have been like $5 a text.
Holy cheapers, $5 a text. And then you had to go
a little bit of a hyperbole.
555-44-999-44-222.
Oh, yeah.
T9 all day.
Yeah, and that just said hello. So in your kind of viewing of this article and all that other stuff, first off, give me your reactions, and second off, like give me where you think we are as Bay Hope. Like, let's diagnose Bay Hope Church right now.
Oh, as Bay Hope?
Yeah, let's diagnose the church. Why not?
Well, I mean, I've been coming here since 2008.
Yeah, so you've seen the trends.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's easy to see the trends when I feel like, especially when in the article when it was getting into the C group, because that's more of like where we are right now. But something that I didn't notice until kind of reading the article was what it was saying about marketing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which I was so, when I looked back, I was so confused.
I just knew you weren't looking at the monitor. Okay. Mike busted me. Okay, keep going. You were in a serious point. I'm sorry.
Marketing. Go back to it, because I want to. I like this.
This is a
point.
good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what you said. So I don't know if this was what you said about the raft. I thought was really interesting, which was, where Christianity, first comparing Christianity to a boat and how it should plow through the waves.
Yep.
Raft is molding to the waves. I feel like in a way, I can see how that, like the reason why that happens, which the reason why you can almost kind of make excuses for that to where like, oh, well, like it makes sense because we're trying to get more people into the doors.
Right.
Like that from I don't want to say from a Christian point of view, like a Christian viewpoint, it makes sense because you want as many people to be exposed to Jesus as possible. What doesn't make sense is what you said, how I feel like like what it should be, which I agree with you. I think that it should be more of a boat to where, yes, like people should be exposed to it, but it shouldn't mold in the way to where I feel like sometimes it sacrifices like biblical views and
100%.
biblical
Oh, yeah,
values,
totally.
in favor of appealing to more people. And then that's where you get the excuses of like, oh, well, I mean, you know, it's fine just because we're like more people are enjoying it, more people are getting into it as a jumping off point, but it's not even a jumping off point anymore. It's really kind of like people are molding their own religion.
Yeah.
In a way that's coming from Christianity.
Right.
But Mike, you said something that was really interesting too about how you said like when you were comparing like, oh, well, you know, like there's these things like if you like these bands, then you might like this.
Yeah.
And you also said, you know, if you're a Christian, then you might like this. I feel like that's also getting to the point where it's like, if you're a Christian, you'll like this, but why will I like that? Well, because he mentions God.
Yeah.
Like, what does that really mean?
Yep.
Like, you might like, you know, a sports player or a musician or something because they mention God in a song or, you know, on the field or, you know, whenever they get a touchdown, they, you know,
They kneel.
I don't know, look up.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but what does that really mean?
Yep.
If that's where it stops.
Well-
I as far as, I mean, Bayhope, I like to think that we've been on a straight trajectory since 2008 from when I've been here. I haven't seen any shift, at least from when I started going here to where we are now, as far as views go or anything.
Sure.
I've felt that we've kind of stayed firm in the beliefs of the Bible, which is why I'm still here. But but yeah, I thought that was a really interesting take on Christianity with what that article was. I will say this too, because when I first started reading the article, I was a little I don't want to say biased against it, but I feel like I was reading it in a way to where I was thinking like, man, like this sounds, I was getting the impression that somebody was writing the article with the intent to have a clickbait article. And I feel like I was kind of at first reading it under that lens until I got about halfway through and then towards the end, which I was like, especially when it was talking about the more of like the marketing to more people, where I'm like, yeah, like that 100% makes sense. Like that is exactly kind of what we're seeing. And then when it was talking about more of like the influencers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, like I was talking with Sean about this when he was here, Sean Curran, and we were talking about evangelicalism and stuff. And, you know, he's in the heart of the Bible Belt, up in Atlanta and all that kind of stuff. And the phrase, even if it just helps one person,
Oh, yeah.
I think is like such a good, is a thing that in both.
Everything short of sin.
Yeah. Well, in like, and again, to us, and maybe, and I don't want to bleed into next week's sort of like our thoughts on this and maybe a bit deeper dive into this.
Yep.
But I think that sums up a lot of American Christianity over the last 100 years or so. It's like, well, you know, if it just helps, it's a lot of reaction to where culture is at.
And then internal justification.
Well, yeah. And then a justification for like, maybe that's not a great idea.
Yeah, like here's the thing with that phrase, like, yeah, like that, it makes sense. If it just helps one person,
Sure.
that's great. But
Yes.
if it helps one person and leads thousands of others off track,
Yeah.
Yeah,
then
but
it's not so much
if
of a
it
great
drives
thing.
10 people away because your programming was bad and it was so
Exactly.
cringy.
But it
like
helps that one person.
Yeah, but like,
Well,
maybe,
like that's the whole.
maybe the net effect is not
Right.
where we want it to be.
Well, and so I think that to me sums up about the last 50 or so years of evangelicalism. And I think we're smack dab right in the middle of it. And I think it justifies so much of what people do. And I do think there is a tension there for sure, where like, yes, we need to do whatever we can. We need to use the tools that are afforded to us and the resources we have. However, we need to use them responsibly and steward them properly.
Agreed?
Yeah. So we can talk more about it next week.
Yeah, I think we've ran a little long, and we apologize for that. This is a topic that has fired all three of us up. When we do our rejoin next time, we're gonna talk a little bit, not necessarily about how to fix it, because trying to pontificate on that, I think, is like one of the worst things we could do, because we're, again, old and we don't know how to fix things. However, there are some thoughts that I have. There are some thoughts that these other two have that I think can benefit the conversation and push things a little bit forward and help you, gentle, fine person listening or watching at home or on your run or while you're cooking or doing whatever you're doing, can help you diagnose a little bit of what's going on around you in church life and help you to really make good foundational decisions. If you have kids, kind of help them see things a little bit clearer. And if you're even questioning, I know deconstruction, Austin and I did an episode on deconstruction last time.
Well, I want to talk more about that too, because that sort of leads into...
That's part of it, yeah. And it's a hot button issue, but it's also an issue that I think we can couch a little bit with how we're actually trying to deal with that in the church itself. Right. So I think we're going to jump. Justin, anything for anything?
Nah, I think we're good.
Great.
Yeah,
Mike?
For part one.
Anything for anything?
Nope. Gotta go.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's pumpkin season. Pumpkin, pmpkn SZN. Pumpkin season. We love you. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Goodbye. Hey, thanks for tuning in to Bay Hope TV. Be sure to like and share these videos with your friends, as it really does help this channel out. And be sure to subscribe for more Bay Hope TV content. As always, thanks for watching.